Love that walk-on music. Did you like the walk-on music?
Absolutely.
Did you like the walk-on music?
Sure.
All right. Joe Lubin, co-founder of Aetherium, founder of Consensus, and Fernando Gutierrez, CMO of Dash.org. Welcome, guys. So we're going to talk a little bit about, it says here we're talking about tomorrow's toolkit for social change beyond the hype. Is it possible to get beyond the hype when we're talking about crypto?
Absolutely. I think last year, these cycles are very good for the sector. Sometimes people criticize all the hype, but in the end, it brings new people in. Some people for the wrong reasons, but many of them for the right ones, and it grows the sector. And when you pass those cycles, we've been through these several times. The projects they mature.
Hype brings in more folks. It's got used. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah. So the prospect of building more trustworthy foundations for our systems, more collaborative infrastructure is profound. And so it's going to transform society as we move forward. Many people are realizing that early. And just as with the dot-com era, people tend to operate in these fear and greed cycles. And so it's just, it's going to be very hard to stop speculators from rushing in. And there's kind of no reason to stop speculators from rushing in, provided what they're able to purchase is legally issued and legally purchasable. And so that sort of attention brings value into our ecosystem. It brings technologists, it brings entrepreneurs, and those people build fundamental infrastructure. So that sort of speculation drives innovation.
All right, let's talk about the toolkit. So Dash is really, I would say, pretty much focused on payments, correct? And that is a payment system where, as we know in crypto, you're getting rid of the intermediary. You're getting rid of the bank. You're going after the unbanked, folks that don't have banks to deal with. And is this, how is that going, Fernando? How is that mission?
It's going good, and there's many exciting things happening around the blockchain. We focus on just one thing that we believe it's needed right now, which is payments. We have projects and teams doing exciting things around the world, but in this conference we are partnering with one specific team, Kuva Cash. They are doing a great project in Zimbabwe. There's real problems with fiat money over there. There's cost shortages. There is hyperinflation. So they are building a system for the people who don't have access to financial instruments to really be able to transact and have access to cash. And it's really exciting. And being able to be part of that. And
let's talk about Africa for a second, because they have really leapfrogged in many ways this whole crypto space and the infrastructure and the payment space. Particularly in Kenya, because they didn't have the legacy players to deal with. They just went right into the mobile phones, and they have the M-Pesa and the other forms of payment. So is it going to be a situation where you see in Africa actually a leapfrog in this type of crypto and payments environment? Joe, are you seeing that?
Absolutely. So we tend to work in a lot of different ways. We invest in startups, we incubate lots of startups. Those sorts of projects are looking to be disruptive, looking to build out different ways to offer value to consumers. So content creators, service providers, resource providers, in that model, in that vision, will be able to access their consumers much more directly without the big intermediaries in the middle in banking, in ride sharing, in the music industries, extracting huge amounts of value. But we're also working with established players. We are the tech element in consortia. We're working with banks and insurance companies and healthcare providers and educators, et cetera, enabling them to build more efficient systems, enabling them to build out essentially new, better business models to better serve their consumers. So we do feel like there's so much incumbency, and this technology is so profound, it's not really going to see its full benefit unless all the people, all the systems in the world are able to avail themselves of that technology. So we sort of see some sort of happy ground in the middle where some of these disruptive approaches and some of these evolutionary approaches work well together.
Okay, you talk about a happy middle ground and a happy path forward, and yet you've got a legacy system, and they are not going to go quietly into that good night. I mean, the bankers are going to be disintermediated. The Financial Times has a story today where they're looking at half of all back-end banking jobs cut. Right, so there's a lot of people who are going to be disrupted, to use the term in the tech space, but they're obviously not going to be pleased about that. Also, you've got a lot of pushback in the legacy system. You've got very negative comments from legacy bankers like Jamie Dimon. You've got negative comments from legacy economists like Nouriel Roubini, right? So, first of all, the question is, what don't they get? I know you've tangled, I believe, with Nouriel. So what don't they understand? What are they missing? And are they even relevant? We'll start with you, Joe. I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, so our perspective is a little bit different than that. Certainly, at first blush, this technology scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of incumbents. They push back. They say things that aren't based in fact. And we've seen people evolve. So Jamie Dimon said some very negative statements, and then he said some conciliatory statements, and now they're building a trading desk. I mean, they're embracing the technology very heavily. They contribute. They've built an infrastructure that's essentially an enterprise-friendly version of Ethereum.
What did R3, which was a consortium in the UK of a bunch of bankers deciding they're going to get into the blockchain business, headed up by one Blythe Masters, who came out of the Jamie.
So that was Digital Asset Holdings.
Okay.
So R3 is Dave Rutter and a bunch of other people.
Okay, but the news is that they are running out of cash, and things are not going well. What are they getting? What are those guys getting wrong, if anything?
So I don't have a view into their organization, but they did some experiments with the Ethereum technology, other blockchain systems, and they essentially decided to build their own technology that was blockchain inspired. They had a bunch of investors, banking
blockchain
institutions.
inspired. What does that mean?
So it means they use cryptography. They hash things. So it's not actually a blockchain system.
Can a centralized organization really do what, let's say, Bitcoin does? In other words, like governments around the world say, hey, we're going to get into the crypto business. We're going to launch our own crypto. But can they, because they're centralized? And the nature of Bitcoin is that it's decentralized. Are these two things compatible?
So I think that going forward, we will have the need to build lots of centralized systems. Currently, high-frequency trading needs that sort of architecture. We can usefully use partially decentralized systems. So maybe a game can be partially decentralized. If you link that into Ethereum, you get the high transaction throughput, and you get the security of Ethereum. There's an architecture for that. Consortia can use partially decentralized systems. So there's definitely a role for those kinds of systems. But in a world in which crypto kitties, crypto collectibles are trading for tens of thousands of dollars, in a world in which we're tokenizing so many assets and we're going to have liquid deep markets for those sorts of assets, we definitely need a layer one technology like Ethereum that's radically decentralized, because that's where you get the real trust from.
Okay, fair enough. Fernando, let's turn to you for a moment. So with Dash, it's a different model. It uses something called the master node model. And there are now a few. It was the first actually to launch with a master node. This is a different kind of approach to how to run a crypto blockchain. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how it works and familiarize people with that?
Yeah, it's still a proof of work coin. So we have miners. They produce blocks. It's exactly like Bitcoin. In fact, Dash is a Bitcoin fork. But we've worked on the next layer of the network, which are the nodes, which in the case of Bitcoin are run by volunteers. So you can't require much from them, because if you do, they'll turn off their servers. In our case, we split the reward. They get some piece of that. And because of that, you can ask them to do certain things. So we are able to do other things for the network from the node level, which means that you are not so dependent on timing, for example. We have instant confirmations or securely confirmed transactions, which happen in a second, because you can do that at that level, which is not tied to the blocks. And we can build a lot of services around those machines.
So the block reward in Dash is divided up in a couple of different ways. One goes toward development, I believe, and another part of the block reward goes toward a treasury, and then that treasury is voted on, and you can promote things within the Dash network, and you can hire developers. And so this idea of governance is key to Dash, and you have the ability to decentralize governance in a way. Comparing Dash with Ethereum for a second, Ethereum, a lot of questions come up. For example, during a crisis, they would fork the coin, and that would come down from the top. That would come down from Vitalik, and people would say, that doesn't seem all that decentralized to me. So how would you compare Dash to Ethereum first?
Well, I think our model is pretty unique. As you said, we split the reward between different parties. One of them goes to that treasury, and the stakeholders in the coin can vote on who gets that part of the reward. That gives, in the end, funding guides the project, but you can also use that system that relies on those nodes to make questions to the network. So that's great because we are able to really grasp what the community wants or the people involved in the project, because you can make questions and actually you get an answer. So we've had some decisions to make along the way, and we can ask and we vote and then we move on. So we haven't had any fork in 4 years, because we are able to, there's no people claiming that they represent the community.
Right, I think Darkcoin, which is the predecessor to Dash, they were on Matt Kaiser report, I think was actually during the very beginning, and then you guys went with Dash, and we've been closely associated with Dash. You guys raised $500,000 in 17 hours for me and to go on a road trip, actually. Which is great. We're hoping to do that again soon. I'll just throw that out there. But now, do you consider you two guys competitors?
No, I think Ethereum is a great project. They do many other things. We do one thing. We're very focused on that. I think there will be many projects that succeed in the space, and every project has its own space. I really wish Ethereum does great. It would be awesome for all of us. I don't think we are really directly competing.
So, Joe, on the governance issue with Ethereum, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, let me answer both those questions.
Sure.
Dash is a very cool platform. Lots of great technologists have been building that. They have their niche, their focus, similar to how Bitcoin developed as essentially a set of use cases around a value token, around money. Yet still there was this blockchain architecture that many people in 2012, 2013 felt could and should be used for any sort of application that a software developer could dream up. That's why we chose to go in the broader direction of building a decentralized application platform. So there's plenty of room for us both to very happily interoperate. With respect to governance, I would argue, contrary to what you indicated, that there is no leader of the Ethereum project. Vitalik is very prominent because he's just a mind-blowingly smart individual and a remarkable person. So if he is in leadership, he leads by doing, he leads by example. He never tells anybody to do anything. He's really good at sourcing information. When we have issues in our ecosystem, there are many different actors with very strong votes. So there are miners and pools and exchanges and many for-profit companies in the space. There's the Ethereum Foundation. There are developers that are employed by the Ethereum Foundation. There are developers that work on the open source software of the foundation that aren't employed by the developers. We have a little short of 40 protocol engineers that work on these systems. And so when decisions need to be made, there are signaling mechanisms, there are voting mechanisms, and even when a decision was made in the DAO, for instance, the software...
Distributed Autonomous Organization.
Yeah, exactly.
Referring back a couple of years ago.
Situation that happened that taught us a whole lot about things like, what immutability means, etc. And the software developers chose to give the people downloading the software choice. So you can choose to keep things going as they are. You can choose to embark on this somewhat new path that excises what we consider to be systemically dangerous damage to the system that could have kept us embroiled in essentially dealing with denial of service attacks for many years.
Yeah, but it does suggest that there's a point of vulnerability, which is goes a little bit against the whole. But let me just point out, I have a bit of housekeeping. If you want to ask a question, I was supposed to mention this at the beginning. Go to your app and ask a question, and it'll pop up on the screen here. We may get to it, but we're quickly running out of time. But Joe, go ahead. You wanted to follow up.
Yeah, let me jump in with one more point. So there has been this notion that forks are a bad thing. Forks are dangerous. Don't do forks. They'll leave your system vulnerable. But right from the start of the Ethereum project, we felt that people's ability to come and fork our open source code base and explore the solution space was very valuable. The fact that people could come and build a better system than us or build a philosophically different system than us if they disagreed with our direction. If we start to behave badly, people can essentially take the project and the community away from us.
Understood, but let me ask you this. So Bitcoin launched, in 2009, and after a few years, there were a group of folks and developers that got frustrated at the rate at which it was developing.
Yeah.
One of them, Vitalik, who I think decided that he was a little bit frustrated with the rate of development, so he created Ethereum. I talked to him before he launched Ethereum in London, and he was discussing this with me, and he launched this brilliant coin, has had remarkable success. Now, the question is, and it goes to Dash as well, in any so-called altcoin, as Bitcoin scales, as it brings on second layer development and Lightning networks and other aspects, is that going to basically cut into every single altcoin's lunch, right? I mean, certainly we don't need 1,800 altcoins. Do we even need 10?
I think you're right that it will cut in some projects. There's a lot of projects that don't bring anything new to the table. But I think that the decisions that Bitcoin is making, or whatever Bitcoin is, obviously, where the project is going, it leaves a lot of empty spaces for other projects to cover. This second layer has a lot of problems attached. Meanwhile, there are other projects which are already delivering on scalability
so there's room for a variety of coins. Like
I don't think
there are a few currencies out there. There's 5 or 10.
Not 1,800, but I think it's much more than 10.
Okay.
Somewhere in the middle.
So is there a shakeout coming at some point, and how do you see that?
So it's really early in our ecosystem. The technologies are still quite immature. We've got some great layer 1 infrastructure that's very secure. We're building layer 2 infrastructure that will add scalability. We're going to add more scalability soon in layer 1 in the Bitcoin space and the Ethereum space. So we're going to achieve the infinite scalability that we see on the internet, where you can add more compute and process more transactions. But we're just figuring this stuff out. It's a vast solution space. We need many different projects to explore that solution space. We have this great mechanism where we can token launch projects and sort of let the market decide. So these aren't just technology platforms. They've taken the form, like so many things that humans construct, of belief systems and religions. And I think it's valuable not to get stuck in a belief system.
About the belief system for a second, because a lot of people get into crypto because of there is a belief system, there is a vision, there is an idea of decentralization, democratization, banking the unbanked, etc. And Joe, your resume is quite extensive, and you've been involved in a very high level, both education, tech projects, corporate projects, and apparently you were spending some time in Jamaica for a while. We're doing some music projects, and so I'll ask both of you the question, is the original spark that drove you to crypto, is it still alive in you, or have we become too corporate at this point?
It's even better, because now we are seeing the impact. In the beginning, it's just an idea, but when you start to see some adoption, real problems solved, it gets you more excited. And I see the people that come into the team, we're hiring all the time, and it's people who were not in the space 4 years ago or 10 years ago, but they are still super excited. They discover the space, they have that passion. I think it's still good. This is very early, as you said. I mean, it's just starting.
And I should mention as well, Fernando, your high-level legal talent and a very extensive resume, and so you still feel that spark, and that you jumped over to this crypto space, and you still feel it. You still wake up like, I feel it.
Yeah, when I started, I mean, like most people here, you start like a hobby, or you get interested. And I was waking up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and people were saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "You wake up at 7 a.m., play golf. I'm building this thing on the internet. This is exciting." And
your golf
every
game
morning
has
is the same.
Your golf game has suffered.
Yeah, well, it never happened.
Joe, the spark is still alive. I can't tell if we're over or we're under. We're wrapping it up.
Over.
Good. You got to wrap it up. Joe, you're gonna have to tweet your answer.
Yeah. So our mission of our company is to build technology that enables the world to build better systems for itself. We're building some of those better systems. The technology was so obviously profound that I knew it would change society for the good, and it's just remarkable how quickly it's gaining traction. And so the spark is growing.
Excellent. Okay, guys, we got to go. Thanks. All righty.
Yeah.